Hello there, it's Jay here from Jay's Vintage Junk, and yeah, we're back on with the Apple Mac Classic. I had some caps arrive earlier today, and nice little surface mount capacitors like that. So after I'd got some free time, I cleaned the board up again, and what I've done with the board now is I give it a scrub down with a toothbrush, just like that, just a normal old toothbrush, and some clear vinegar. Now all of that was to do was to neutralise any of the alkali that was left from that leaking battery that was still on the board. Even though, I mean, I've cleaned it with isoprop and things like that, but just to get rid of that last bit of alkali that could be on there. Like I say, I've given it a clean down with some vinegar, and then I cleaned it again with isoprop. This also helps to get rid of that horrible smell you get from the old capacitors, because if you've got most of this off the board before you start, obviously the smell is much reduced. So after I'd done that, I set up with the camera, because I was planning on filming me change these capacitors around here and doing all the capacitors, and unfortunately it's been an absolute bloody nightmare to do them, and there was just no way I could actually do it with the camera in front of me. And so this is a really crap camera that I'm using at the moment until I can get something better, and I have to literally have it right in front of where I'm working. And with work like this, I really need to use either my USB microscope or I have actually it's a dissection microscope, which is very, very useful for doing stuff like this. But obviously I can't use that and have the camera here as well, so unfortunately I've no footage of me actually replacing these capacitors, but surface to say they were horrible to replace. Even getting these off the board was tricky. Now these are all the old ones you can see around here that I've taken off. Now there's various ways of removing surface mount capacitors from circuit boards. The way you should definitely not do it is the way I've seen quite a few people on YouTube and on other tutorials do it, which is get a pair of pliers like that, or a pair of side cutters like that, and basically just go at the capacitor and cut it off, and then pull off the rest of it and clean up the remains. Now, some people may have had perfect success with that, but you've got a very good chance of actually pulling the pad straight off the board. So what I like to do is get the soldering iron and actually heat up one side of the leg like that, and then possibly to stop you burning your fingers, use a pair of pliers like this or some tweezers, and you heat the leg up and you gently rock the capacitor that way, then you heat that leg up and rock it that way and bring the capacitor off. And that's the technique that basically I use whenever I'm doing on these boards that have got surface mount capacitors. Unfortunately, this board is so corroded that even with that technique, I heated up the pad on one side, and it came up. I heated it up on the other side, and the pad came off with the capacitor. I've had that happen a couple of times on this board now. That capacitor there, I lost the pad on this side here. That capacitor there, I lost the pad on that side, and one of the capacitors over here, I lost one of the pads. Fortunately, in both instances over here, there was enough of there was either the track left which I was able to tin up, or there was a wire that pad connected to very close, which I was able just to slightly reorientate the capacitors and get them to connect to where they're actually connecting circuit correctly, even though they're not actually orientated quite like they should be now. After that, I got utterly fed up with this board. These things are not easy to work on, these little surface mount capacitors. So for the 4 capacitors here, I must admit I cheated, and I've actually just used regular PCB mount well, radial capacitors. They're not even new capacitors. I robbed them off. That's a board out of an old TV digital box, which the remote control's broken on. The box actually still worked fine, so there's nothing wrong with these capacitors. I just didn't have any small ones like that in stock, and I wanted to see if this thing would work, and I was not fiddling about with the amount of... It took me probably the best part of 2 hours to change them 4 capacitors. Now, I was expecting to do the whole board in under an hour. So you can tell how much... I have quite a lot of experience in working on these boards. That's basically how bad the board was. It's basically the solder has just turned to something which is no longer resembles solder. Even these, it took me a hell of a lot of work to get the old capacitors off. Like I said, I lost a leg over there, but fortunately there was a via right next to it which I was able to clean up and tin and get the capacitors soldered to. These capacitors are actually a lot easier to work on than these little surface mount ones. But anyway, that's as far as I've got. I've finished about 10 minutes ago and thought, sod it, I'll do a quick video and we'll fire this thing up and see if we've made any progress on it. I'm not holding up that much hope with this thing. It really is very corroded. There's probably corrosion underneath the 68,000 there. That RTC really needs replacing. I'm not adverse to replacing these types of ICs. Like I said, I have a hot air rework station like this. It's only a cheapie, but it does the job. I'm not adverse to working on ICs like this, but it's what you're going to find underneath. There's a good chance that there's tracers under there. If the acid's actually got underneath that chip, it's going to have done a lot of damage. Right, well, I'm going to put this back in the Mac now. We'll fire it up and we'll see if we've got any change from the checkerboard, and we'll take it from there. So I'm just going to move you back a bit. Let's get something like that. That's a nice shot, isn't it? Right, let's move that out of the way for the time being, and we'll bring the Mac Classic back in. Oh, another thing that I found out quite stupidly of me. When I was last showing this, I spent all this time cleaning up them contacts there. They must be for some kind of in-house diagnostics or something like that, because there's actually nowhere in the computer itself round here that it actually connects to. So that was my silly mistake there. Like I say, I'm not a huge Mac aficionado. I don't work on them like some people do. I don't know Macs that well. So it was probably an easy mistake to make that. Anyway, let's get this back in the case, and we'll see if it actually does anything now. There we go. That's back where it lives. And this time, I'm not going to bother connecting up this. I'm just going to connect the power up. Okay, that's the power connected in. So we don't need the disk drive, we don't need anything like that connected in. We just want to see whether this thing's going to do more than a checkerboard, which is what it's all it has been doing since we started this little project. Let's give it some power. And let's see whether this is going to do any more than it did last time. Right, let's see. Nope. There we go. We're still... Oh, we've got a little bit more crap on the screen, as you can see here. I've got a little bit more crap on the screen, but no. I honestly think this board's past it. I don't think this board's going to live again. I may do a couple of them vias that look a little bit iffy. I'll clean a few of them up, put a few bodge wires in for them. I know there's at least a few which have gone completely. Problem with this board is it's not a double layer board. Things like, just give me a second. things like this, which is the Amiga 500 Plus board, are a double layer board. You've got a foil on that side, you've got a foil on that side, and you've basically got a fibre material in the middle. And then the wires connect them two foils together. On the Mac Classic board, you've got more layers than that. You've actually got layers inside, in between that fiberglass, sandwiched in there. Now, some of them wires which are corroded actually go to that internal layer in there, so if I can't somehow make a contact to it. I did watch a very interesting video years ago by Pace, actually showing old school rework of boards where they actually went in with a little ball mill and ground away at the circuit board to get to an internal fault in the board and repair it, and then epoxy the board back together. I mean, I don't think anyone's probably done work like that in 30-40 years. Boards aren't that expensive now like they used to be. But possibly that would be my only chance of getting that board up and running again. I may have a go at it, I may not. So I don't really know what to do with this one at the moment. Like I said, I can wait and look about, see if I can get another logic board for it. I will attempt to repair that one. I will give it a little bit more work, but like I said, I don't think, honestly, it's going to live again. I think the corrosion on it really is just too bad. I could think about perhaps doing something interesting with this. I don't believe I can really use the screen. From what I've gathered in the past, you can't really hook anything but a Mac up to these CRTs. But I could possibly replace that with an LCD, and that case is certainly big enough to take a mini ITX motherboard. There's a possibility I could build a modern computer in there, or even something like a Raspberry Pi, and do something with it like that. I honestly don't know. I'll leave it at this for today, and I'll have a think about it. Like I said, ideally I need a better board to work on that just needs a recap or something, and get it up and working that way. But if not, I will think of something to do with this Mac Classic. So unfortunately we've not got a success today, but we'll keep having a look, see what else we can do with it. So I'm going to leave it at that for now. So thanks for watching, and goodbye.